All right, hello. Welcome to webinar two of our webinar series. The Adult Attachment Program is putting together um, monthly webinars, and we're also going to be having the webinars serve, I believe, as podcasts. So there's lots of exciting things swimming around and happening. Um, Today's topic we're going to be talking about is specifically anxious, preoccupied attachment. And obviously, just to introduce myself, my name is Dr. Zach Klein, and I founded the Adult Attachment Program, and we're a training institution, but um, we also provide direct services to many clients and patients who want and need attachment repair. Uh, and in my experience, the majority of the people that end up coming are have some form of preoccupied attachment. Now, that's not a generalization, but obviously you will get dismissing individuals. But in general, somebody who's seeking treatment is already kind of outwardly focused and wanting to be fixed. And so it's kind of part of the attachment dynamic anyways, whereas the dismissing dynamic is one of leave me alone, I'm okay. Um, so there's less of a chance that they find themselves in therapy voluntarily. Um, but so we're just going to take a few different angles looking at um, some of the conditions that create the anxious ambivalent attachment in infancy, and that's what turns into the preoccupied attachment. It's really just an extension of the anxious ambivalent style that Mary Main would have classified during the strange situation. Um, she would postulate that those children grow up to be, if there's not some earned security, that they grow up to be the preoccupied population. So, um, we're also going to talk about, this is not talked about enough, I don't think, healthy communication with a preoccupied person, how to actually be with a preoccupied person and not become triggered or activated yourself, because that's often what happens, not only as a clinician, but just as a person, a friend, a partner. We're going to look at some of the common manifestations of preoccupied attachment in adulthood. Um, and then if there's time, I'm going to talk about how secure imagery, specifically in integrative attachment therapy, uh, is um, is used specifically with this population and how and why we tailor it certain ways. So I wanted to start by just having you or reading this poem. This is a poem from somebody who is taking on the persona um, of a preoccupied, attached person. So, with that in mind, I waited for your love, like drought yearns for rain. Parched, arid land, promised but never arriving. You were the sun I orbited, though your fire burned. Your shadow loomed large, but your presence was absent. You taught me distance. You were never available. I became fluent in the art of longing. I reach out in the dark, seeking comfort, cold emptiness, no role model, no father. I reached out for love, arms were open. My love spurned, you sought only fleeting pleasures. My attachment, now anxious, I cling, overthinking. I replay your absence, a curse on my relationships. From you, I learned to love someone withholding my heart, worried they'll leave me like you. I'm unworthy. You left quietly, not in a rage, not in a ruin, but by choice. Your departure was no tragedy, born from selfishness. I was not a priority. We were not a family. You're a footnote. I became the fixer, the forgiver, and man of the house, the one who asks, what did I do wrong? Why didn't you love me? Even now, I chase ghosts of attachment in my lovers. I carried your legacy like a broken compass, seeking to lead me to manhood where I can be strong. You built no foundation, abandon your own father's teachings. Am I a man or a child in a dark forest, feeling alone? Now I hold on to love like a suffocating octopus embrace. I watch doors, fearful, though slammed shut. I beg for reassurance from strangers, but they mirror your disinterest. It's all that I know. I scream in the dark, tears overflowing. Now I'm a husband, not knowing how to be a man. How can I be what she needs when you left her? If you're my guide, am I doomed to fall, to be alone? So that's a heavy poem, and what really strikes me and what I wanted to just why I wanted to have it was because it really, really points to the longing and the desperation almost um, for uh, secure attachment, for to be seen, to be soothed, to be acknowledged, to be, all the things that secure children are lucky enough to get. Um, so yeah, just keep that poem in your mind as we sort of talk about what this is. Um, so how is anxious attachment formed? Well, uh, a number of ways, but primarily it's parental responsiveness being inconsistent. So it's not completely absent like it would be for a dismissing child. Um, it's inconsistent. It's at times available and at times not available. And there could be a number of reasons for that. And some of those reasons are time being available, having to work, both parents needing to work, um, that could definitely create that inconsistency. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. Oftentimes alcoholism, drug abuse, when mom or dad gets that right combo or right number of drinks and they're very available and present and engaging and fun and then when they're coming down they are quite the opposite and the child learns that there's something they're doing that must be wrong, that on days when their needs are not met, that it must be their fault. And so they begin to exaggerate or upregulate the attachment system. If I'm not just going to be seen, then I've got to make sure that I'm seen by screaming, throwing a temper, or acting out. Um, and then this is also the beginning of the outside, what we call outside in orientation, where the child's orientation of their attention is outward in, meaning most of the attention is out, kind of scanning the environment. Am I safe to play? Is what mood is mom in? Is dad coming home? All these things outwardly focused that they need to worry about, which prevents natural development that would be happening at that time if they weren't worrying about that. So, um, oftentimes the child is expected to regulate the parent's state of mind. We call that role reversal, over involving. But always the caregiver is anxious and often chronically anxious and aroused. And so um, when the caregiver is stressed out, uh, the child is like Dan Siegel says children are they're like sponges. Um, they just sponge in everything that's around them. And if what's around them is stress and anxiety and arousal, then that's what they're going to sponge in, is that stress and that anxiety. And I have a video of Dan Siegel who describes that very well. Um, so I'll let him do that. Um, and we know that amplifying stress it inhibits in exploratory behavior and it stifles self-development. Um, so often these people will grow to be chronic caretakers because they believe that they've built the internal working model that everyone else needs to be okay. Dad needs to have his drink. Mom needs to have her channel 5, whatever, and then I can breathe. Right. So they learn to become chronic caretakers because the belief is if others aren't taken care of, then I'm of no value, I'm unlovable, etc. So yeah, when our survival is dependent on the well-being of someone else, you tend to comply, right? So when if you really believe the attachment figure is not going to meet your needs, you tend to shut the attachment system down. And that's what happens with dismissing people. Um, but what I mean by what you tend to comply with the anxious people, if your mother is anxious and she's asking you to clean a thing a certain way or to whatever it is, speak or dress or behave a certain way, you tend to comply because it's your caregiver and it's your representation of the world. Um, but you were doing this out of a sense of survival, anxiety, or abandonment terror. So it's very familiar to play rescuer or people pleaser. So, but understanding that this is the development of the false self, um, the false sense of self, which is this sense of self that was developed out of a necessity to please the other, whether it's mom or dad or whoever. Uh, the model is built internally that um, it's their responsibility to ensure others are okay until they can be okay. So, and yeah, the caregiver's anxiety overwhelms the child. Think about them as a sponge. They don't understand it. It's not theirs. It's an extension of the caregiver's own fear or lack of confidence or misattunement. Um, so unfortunately, as babies and toddlers, we don't know mindfulness in versus mindfulness out. It's like mom's overwhelmed, like we're overwhelmed. Like that's that. Um, so let me make sure I'm not being redundant here. Um, So, yeah, some of the things that are common among preoccupied parents is the inconsistency, the unpredictability, the overwhelm with family or work, the multitasking while caretaking, so being on the phone while they're taking care of the child, or uh, or over attentiveness to the child's needs and fear states. Um, they're highly involved. Um, the child is highly involved in the parent states, especially problematic and negative states, because those are the ones that are uh, dangerous, threatening. There's often a lack of support for exploratory behavior and positive affect. So if the child does some exploration, crawls across the room, for the first time and plays with a toy or something, and there's no delight shown in that. There's no encouragement shown in that because of the lack of support for that exploratory behavior um, that the parents are often unconscious that they're even doing. Uh, so let's actually listen to what Dan Siegel, who is a psychiatrist at UCLA, and he has great things to say on ambivalent attachment. It says in the text as the video proceeds, it says on disorganized attachment, but that's not it. That's a typo. It's on ambivalent, anxious, preoccupied. So.
Does California need a MAGA governor? Absolutely not. But business as usual?
Okay.
Now, in people with ambivalent attachment histories, what you see there is if I'm feeling hungry and my internal state is hunger, and I cry out of hunger, and you're my mom, and you see that I'm hungry, but you yourself have a very anxious, ambivalent history, and you really doubt your capacity as a mom. So you come to me seeing I'm hungry, really wanting to feed me, but being terrified oh, that you're not going to be able to do it, and nervous and concerned and doubting your ability, and you come with all this anxiety inside of you that I'm just hungry, but now you're feeling anxious. So my mirror neurons, which probably should be called, sponge neurons, is really what it is. I'm not really going to so much mirror you as sponge in, just soak in your internal state. So I sponge in what's going on to you. I'm hungry, but now since you're feeling anxious, I'm feeling anxious. There's no reason for me to have your anxiety, but because you have unresolved issues, you have leftover garbage, I pick them up. My sense of self then becomes very confused. All I know is, as a 2 month old, 3 month old, year old kid, is I'm hungry. But now hunger gets neurologically connected to anxiety and uncertainty for no reason except from our interaction. So there's where the mirror neurons can make my internal sense of self confused. In the avoidantly attached kid, it's kind of disconnected. In the ambivalently attached kid, it's confusion.
So I like I like Dan Siegel. I think he explains it really well. That idea of, the kid is just hungry, and then mom becomes anxious, doesn't know if she's confident enough, or dad, to feed the child or even know that they're hungry. So now hunger gets coupled with all this anxiety, from the parent, and who knows, that's likely how eating disorders might start. I'm not saying that out of knowledge, I'm just guessing. Um, so again, preoccupied attachment in adults, the big thing is the fear of abandonment. Um, Urgent attempts to maintain the partner's attention. So this is often in relationship, need for repeated approval and validation, and then difficulty trusting it when you provide it. They're highly reactive to perceived or imagined disapproval. They're clingy, they're jealous, demanding, angry, compulsive caretakers. They have definitely inhibited exploratory behavior, poorly developed sense of self, low reflective capacity, and definitely that outside in orientation where they're looking outward to solve an inside problem, um, which is how codependence starts often. So, um, however, uh, you know, they can be incredibly generous and attentive to those they care about. Every attachment style has its strengths, its superpowers, and for preoccupied people, they definitely have the ability to be sensitive, um, to their environment, and they will readily tell someone how they feel. They do tend to blame feelings on others. You made me feel this way, and that again is that outside in, orientation. And the biggest fear is abandonment. So when this is triggered or activated, that's when they can panic, really get into a lower functioning state when there's a real threat of abandonment from a attachment figure that they have invested time, energy, self in. Um, they're lively and vivid. They're often overwhelmed by their feelings. So they definitely want to avoid distance from others. So that, in other words, they want to maintain proximity. They want to be close. Um, they're, but they're filled with self-doubt, and it's because they're scared of independence. They learned a sense of helplessness because of the inconsistent need being met and no real strategy to get that need met. Um, the dismissing kid turns off the attachment system altogether and develops all their own little strategies and worlds and the anxious child just anxious and can't shut off that attachment system as much as they might want to. It's actually activated. So interestingly, neuropsych research showed that preoccupied people have trouble harnessing the linguistic and analytic part of the left brain. I thought that was quite interesting. Um, Left brain being analytical, um, less emotion. So once preoccupation interferes with your functioning, it can be diagnostically, histrionic to all the way to borderline. Um, like I said, the greatest threat is separation and isolation. So merging is the ultimate goal, enmeshment, to actually merge with you so that their sense of self is now connected to something that they think that they see as ideal or good. Um, and like I said, the unpredictability of the early attachment figures teaches them they need to amplify and exaggerate their distress to be seen. So that's not something you want to enable. You want to, let them know that you will meet their needs. You will see them. Uh, what you know that they don't need to amplify and exaggerate their distress. In fact, when they do that, it makes maybe more difficult to approach. Um, so there definitely is a sense of push and pull. They begin to when they begin to feel separation or perceived rejection from a close attachment figure. Um, They may say things that threaten the relationship. I hate you. You don't care about me. Um, and interestingly, this research showed that they're not proud of the behavior, but in the moment they feel they have no choice. And they feel like they have no choice because it's survival. Attachment is survival. Just like food, just like water, we need attachment. We need love. We need a trusted attachment figure to develop securely and on a healthy trajectory. Um, and so that is the, you know, goal of life. And so when that's being threatened, of course you feel like you have no choice. Um, your existence is being threatened in some way. So again, on the severe side, so some of this I see, there is this approach, withdraw strategy, um, coming close, and then when the closeness is met, there's kind of like a repulsion and a rupture, but as long as you repair, then that's good. You want to and point it out, beg for help and then withdraw from it. This kind of behavior is not something to be really surprised by. And chronically reenacting the unresolved trauma. And that takes so many different shapes and forms, um, just depending on the trauma and the individual and when it happened. Yeah, lots of variables. So for therapists, for coaches, for friends, for partners, um, for family members, we must get in touch with empathy. We must get in touch with our understanding with our experience of helplessness, of chaos, and of difficulty of life. And then understanding that that's pretty much the baseline for what the preoccupied experience is, and allowing that to cultivate some compassion for the person. Um, Limit setting is very important, and there's a way to do it, and it took me a little while to learn, but there's a way to do it that's not it doesn't sound punitive at all, and it's just if you do X, I will do Y. So I had a patient at my postdoctoral internship who was constantly asking for Dr. Zach. They all called me Dr. Zach. And so uh, I'd get a, knock on my office and, Dr. Behind so and so is wants you. And so for the first couple of days, I would go and I'd pretty much go every time that I was called by this patient. Then eventually I realized that I was doing this. I was enabling um, this, if you exaggerate and throw a fit, okay, I'll come. Um, but I, realize that is just enabling and strengthening that belief that they have to be, you know, invasive and aggressive and volatile to get their needs met. And so even just talking to the patient, I remember and saying, hey, this is the time I'm available. If you come at this time, I will be sure to be there. So if you do X, how do Y? So, and yeah, we must be able to tolerate their anger. If you want to have a relationship or be in relationship with them, or treat them, we must be able to tolerate their anger, their blame, and the helplessness. You want to illuminate the dissociated wishes, beliefs, and desires that you can see through their behavior, but they're always going to be focused on uh, the other and not self. So helping to just show and help them to discover their own wishes, beliefs, and desires. So, patterns of experience for the adult preoccupied person, they're found to be low on measures of self-confidence and to have a weak and poorly developed sense of self. Um, the less developed differentiated self-structure and poor self-other differentiation, which is what I was talking about, outside in orientation, can be explained by and can explain their tendency to have an outside an outside in orientation. So because of childhood experience of having to attend to caregiver states in order to increase the likelihood of their own needs being met, they tend to attune to and take care of others first. Their well-being, their stability, and validity on other people's states. Um, and this pattern is consistent with codependence. Too much focus on the other limits development of our own sense of self and our own healthy differentiation. Um, I wanted to mention briefly something about preoccupation and metacognition. The therapy that I am practicing currently, integrative attachment therapy, it has a three-pillar model, and the first pillar is helping develop collaboration by having a collaborative relationship with the patient. The second pillar is developing metacognition or reflective functioning, because that we know is the highest correlation with secure attachment. Securely attached people can metacognize. Anxious, preoccupied adults have low metacognitive functioning. Um, I'll explain what that means. So there's a particular deficit in identification of internal states, their own and others. So there's different ways that your reflective functioning can be impacted. And for preoccupied people, the identification of internal states of their self and others is impacted. Hypervigilant over-involvement in the state of others makes little room for developing awareness of their own. And even though sometimes their other focus results in refined sensitivity and accurate identification of other states, the projection of expectation of inconsistent responsiveness often interferes with inaccurate identification. So no matter what that expectation of inconsistent responsiveness is going to interfere with the ability to, in a skillful, coherent way, um, reflect on your mind states and the mind states of others, because you don't know, the person with low reflective function doesn't necessarily know the difference. Can't really feel the difference. So on the AAI, because it's talked about quite a bit and it's a commonly used assessment, um, people who are preoccupied have, excessive verbalization. The preoccupation with specific relationships and experiences, emotion laden, vague, or overly detailed accounts. There's self-rejection, there's blame for relationship problems. Often they'll alternate with anger at others for their perceived relapses, or lapses. And then there's often verbal confusion of perspective, self-other, child, parent. So they'll go from talking about themselves in first person to talking about the mom in first person, and there's no clear separation. Um, Yeah, just for those who are interested, these are all of the all of the AAI categories, and the preoccupied ones here. You can either be passively preoccupied, angrily preoccupied, or fearfully preoccupied. Um, and angrily preoccupied is a little tricky. It's not necessarily that you're preoccupied with anger, but it's that there's um, some some anger or lack of resolution that comes out in the speech that we can see on the transcript, um, coders of the AAI, and it's obvious when it's there because a person goes from speaking coherently, about a situation to all of a sudden switching into mom's voice and being kind of scary in their tone or something like that. And then fearfully preoccupied would be that during the interview they bring in fearful accounts or fearful memories out of context where they're not really asked for them. Um, and passive preoccupation is just kind of beating around the bush. It's kind of like you read the entire transcript and then you're like, um, uh, still kind of confused about the person's life. Um, that's usually passive preoccupation. Um, and then there's all these subclassifications. It's not that important that we get into, but um, we would go through this and this is how we scored every time. Um, and you can see, no weak, moderate, or strong for all of these different criteria of the transcript of the interview. So, factors that lead to attachment activation in preoccupied people is a partner behaving inconsistently. So know that you're going to want to be consistent if you're with someone who has this particular attachment style. Um, if a partner forgets important events such as their birthday or anniversary, that's a trigger. The partner coming home late, the partner not messaging back when anticipated, a partner failing to notice something new, like a new haircut. These are all things that often lead to activations. What I mean by activations is really just triggers in preoccupied people. And so a healthy reaction to activations in preoccupied people is to resist matching their big emotional reaction, calm down, calm yourself down, and when you become overly stimulated, and then go and connect. You can't connect if you're activated. If your sympathetic nervous system is going and your amygdala is pumping and you're in fight, flight, or freeze, you're not going to be able to connect with another person on an intimate, secure level. So we don't we don't even try that. We know that in that moment, what needs to happen is soothing, safety, attunement, delight, encouragement, all the things that are the antidote to antidote, yeah, to this. So, managing your frustration if your partner's plans change. It's a good one. And handle a conflict without becoming aggressive. Because that's something that's going to trigger somebody who's preoccupied is that any kind of aggression whatsoever. So it's asking a lot, but it's um, it's you know it's difficult to be with a very preoccupied person. Um, so still healthy reactions to activated preoccupied people. Be aware of your desire to be the rescuer or to be idealized. So for clinicians, we call that countertransference, right? The transference is that the patient is transferring their anxiety, their fear of abandonment by idealizing us, and that's common. So you're the best therapist ever. Oh my God, blah, 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 blah. And it's important for anyone, a therapist included, to notice that feeling that, oh, that feels good to kind of feel like the rescuer or that I'm idealized and to collude in that. And so you don't want to do that. You want to help them bring some metacognitive awareness to the experience and be a secure base rather than the rescuer, right? Do not become overprotective because this just reinforces that hyperactivating strategy. So, and finally, not dealing with surface level helplessness, but connect with what's beneath. A fear of abandonment, lack of independence, healthy reactions to activated, preoccupied people, unhealthy reactions to activated, preoccupied people. Um, how constantly thinking about the relationship, uh, focusing on potential threats to their relationship, trying to be as emotionally and physically close to their partner as possible, constantly trying to contact their partner, using blame or guilt during an argument to get what they want, becoming angry, even if this anger is sometimes directed at themselves. So these are not healthy reactions that we're looking for. When people try to get their needs met through anger, blaming, guilt, nagging, as you all know, this is very stressful for the partner. John Gottman did some research that's interesting that says that for every one negative feeling or interaction, that it takes five positive ones to restore balance or security. Um, so he's asking a lot there. Um, and yeah, often people will react in two ways. The anxious person will try really hard to make their anxious loved ones happy, or they will check out in order to protect themselves. One's a preoccupied response, one is a dismissing response, and neither of them are sustainable in the long term, and neither of them are really the secure response either. So, what hmm, what are some recommendations? What are some ways to be with preoccupied people, clients, patients? Reassurance. they need reassurance. They need to know that you're not going anywhere. It means more to them than you think. So, as often as you want to, let them know that you're there with them and that you're not going anywhere. Um, and selectively attune to exploratory behavior. So remember, they shut down the exploratory system because they became preoccupied with the attachment system. So the exploratory system is at a deficit. So when they say something that is exploratory in nature, like I want to go on a 10-day silent retreat by myself, that's something that you would want to selectively attune to and delight in and encourage because you know, because you're smart and because you took this webinar, that preoccupied people need that reassurance and also struggle with exploratory behavior. So if they are doing something that's exploratory or even thinking about it, that's something you want to reinforce. Um, Proximity and contact is very important. Even eye contact. Um, they're very sensitive to rejection cues. So oftentimes you might need to take the lead, telling them to slow down, give me a moment to think. If you find yourself getting escalated as they escalate, and pace their expectations and anticipation. So it's almost like that if you do X, I will do Y, but we'll talk about that right after we finish this. And so you're not really, yeah, you're just saying we'll talk about that right after we finish this. It's not really a question, it's just a statement. This is when we're going to talk about that. Um, and then ask for feedback. How did the way we talked in the car today, how did that work for you? You know, um, did I at some point create who knows what in you, or was there anything that happened that was particularly pleasant or reassuring? Also, getting consent. So state your intention to, if you want to check in at a certain time, a certain day, um, request what you want on a timeline that's comfortable to the person because often they require a lot of time between things to gather themselves. So request a specific amount of time, and then be ready and willing to stop when they hit their wall and become usually overwhelmed because they're spending way too much energy um, trying to connect. So once that consent is established, then collaborate. Then, how are you doing? Look, what's what's uh what's new in your life, and oh, this is new in my life, and holding each other accountable and all that good stuff. So, but yeah, until safety and security are established, collaboration will not work well. Making decisions, even about going to dinner, you will have trouble. Someone will not want to make a decision. The other person will be upset because the other person's not making a decision, and it's just a mess. So you want to help them focus on their self-experience, which corrects for that inside, outside in orientation. I wonder if you're angry because I showed up a little late. It gives them some coherence to their state. Being a consistent, calming presence, and then connect and redirect. This is a Dan Siegel thing. Uh, and it's basically connecting, seeing them, and then redirecting the attention. And I'm going to let him explain it. Here, let's see.
There are studies that everybody should know about that I summarize with the phrase, name it to tame it. So if you're really agitated, you're frightened of being rejected again, or you're really upset with what happened, or you're angry or whatever, in Maria's right brain, I can tell you this, in addition to right and left, there's, now please excuse these incredibly simplistic statements, but there's an upstairs brain and a downstairs brain. Now, I'm fine with that for this parenting book, but believe me, my other foot is in science, and the scientists would see that and go, what? But the fact is, there's a cortical rim where a lot of this higher stuff goes on, and there's everything below the cortex. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your fingers and put your hands over the top, give this a try. This would be in my brain like this, see? And so this would be the cortex where you do all your thinking and planning and all that kind of stuff. If you lift up your cortex, you have everything below the cortex, which we call the downstairs brain. So that's reasonable. Downstairs is just a substitute for the word subcortical, which freaks parents out. So downstairs. And it's the upstairs brain is the cortex. Okay, so you lift up your upstairs brain, you go to your downstairs brain, that's the subcortex. It's the limbic area and it's the brainstem. These are very ancient circuits responsible for things like emotion and motivation and fight, flight, freeze reaction and your arousal states, whether you're awake or asleep, stuff like that. So what happens at that moment is, if we did a scan on your brain, we would say that your right amygdala, your limbic area, and your downstairs brain, the downstairs brain is super active. I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared. And studies show that if you have this kind of presence and of mind, I can get Maria's left brain to name the feeling from the downstairs brain. And you can show that she will squirt soothing neurotransmitters down to her right limbic area, right downstairs brain, and calm it down. Okay, so we quickly summarize that entire set of studies with name it to tame it. And so that's all parents need to know. The book, we didn't put any of this stuff, but everything is backed up by science, believe me.
So what does that look like? I come to you and I have a problem.
So here's what it looks like. So let's say you're agitated about being rejected by your friends. So I give you the hug. All I'm doing at that moment, not naming anything, you don't jump to that. First, it's connect and then redirect. So that's, we have these strategies, connect and redirect. So the idea is, first I connect with my right hemisphere. That helps soothe your whole system, but you're still nervous about going back to school. So then I say, well, let's talk about it. And you say, well, this happened, and she was there, and she was going to go to the party, but she didn't want to go. And then they turned away from me. They wouldn't have lunch with me. And I said, sounds like you're really feeling a big feeling of fear that when you go to school tomorrow, no one's going to want to have lunch with you. So we're naming fear.
And I thought I was angry.
And maybe you were angry too.
But it helps to have the
right, but you have to actually name the accurate emotion.
Yeah, I hear that.
Right? Because we could say, well, you're feeling excited to go for popsicles, but that's wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not just naming anything.
And when you name it, it registers as true. That's what I'm getting at. Is sometimes we think we're angry, but in fact we're sad or we're fearful. So by you saying fear, it might in fact
that would calm your downstairs brain.
Yeah.
Right. So at that moment, then we're using first connecting with the right hemisphere, helps the system get stabilized. You don't feel alone. The next step is to name it to tame it. So I'm going to now help you with my left brain, because I'm going to use both my hemispheres together and go, gosh, I wonder what my daughter's really feeling here. And I'm not going to tell you what you're feeling, but I would say something like, I wonder if you're feeling scared. And then in Maria's brain, the whole system calms down.
I think that's so interesting. the the whole system calms down just by naming, and um, and it's similar to Buddhist psychology, where just by naming something, by noting something, we disidentify with it, we um, relate to it rather than from it. It's a very similar concept. So, um, this was a kind of a stupid, funny blog, but the superpowers of anxious attachment at work. They're likely to detect and alert others to workplace problems. They're open to working and communicating as part of a team. They're willing to seek support from a team and trust in others. They're likely to work hard to achieve a positive outcome. They're compliant, usually, in the workplace, and they continuously evaluate their performance and quality of work, right? So there's positive slants in relationships. They devote themselves fully. They do fall in love easily, but they are willing to work hard on relationships. They're very highly attuned to their partner, um, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. And they do help their partners to see themselves positively. Components of anxious attachment in friendships, which we've all had, could crave closeness and connectedness with friends. They can be friendly and accepting. They act as the caretaker within groups, and they work hard at maintaining friendships. So, not painting a picture of, no attachment strategy is bad, but people on the preoccupied spectrum fall in the histrionic borderline spectrum, and that group often gets stigmatized way unfairly. Um, so that's why I'm saying that. Um, so for the preoccupied adult, secure imagery, secure attachment, the way to restructure the preoccupied beliefs in a framework and a model where you imagine having ideal parents who uh, treated you in ways that you needed. Um, and it's a whole nother webinar, but I just wanted to just say a few things about uh, secure imagery for a preoccupied adult. So, because they're constantly worried about the parent's state of mind, you don't have to worry about the parent's state of mind. And if at any time you start worrying about that, imagine that they are responsive to you and that they make a comment about your internal state and bring it back to yourself. They notice all the subtle changes in your mood. So that's attunement. Moment by moment. What a relief to not have to worry about their state of mind. Really take in what that feels like. And oftentimes, people have never experienced that before. Um, that possibility that they don't have to worry about their caregiver's state of mind. Um, they act in a way as to calm and comfort you physically. You can feel the gentle touch that's so reassuring. Verbally, they're reassuring. Everything is all right. And you respond to this in a way that dampens your anxiety, becoming more and more calm. Really take in that calming effect now. So you're totally soothing any attachment activation. Um, so you definitely want to explore as a child in new ways and discover in new ways with the support of the ideal parents. They will have anxiety come up, so imagine that the IPFs are constantly in tuned and in touch with verbal reassurance, constantly soothing, constantly comforting. And then there's really some main objectives, and you want to correct for the outside in orientation. So you want to build the preoccupied person's ability to become aware of what they're feeling in the moment, and then, you know, at advanced stages, even to act upon and trust their own intrinsic intuition enough to even allow it to influence their behavior, which they've never done because nothing is safe or approved unless it's approved by someone else, usually. So you want to correct for the outside in orientation. You want to regulate the child's anxiety. So as you go back to imagining them as a child, that you have the parents really regulate their anxiety, that you have parents who are attuned to a wide range of emotions because, anxious kids, they weren't allowed to express emotion. Um, it would upset the parent. So, and then encourage exploratory behavior with the ideal parent support. So encouraging them, building ideal play places, doing all the exploration that likely was prevented, not allowed. So, talk a little bit about some research on some of the positive effects of just secure attachment imagery. Why would we do this? Why would we even do this work? So, um, in 2015, there was a study. There was obviously an experimental and a control group, and experimental group was exposed. Well, both groups were exposed to. Okay. Control group individuals exposed to threatening faces exhibited amygdala activation. Subjects experiencing secure attachment imagery priming before the pictures did not have amygdala activation. Okay, so you have two groups. You have one group who just gets shown threatening faces. You have one group who gets shown threatening faces, but before that, they get primed with secure attachment imagery, like I was reading a couple slides ago. Um, that group did not have amygdala activation. Something about the secure imagery priming told and taught the amygdala, which is the fight or flight, that it's safe, that it doesn't have to uh, activate when looking at threatening faces. That's fascinating to me. And the implications of that. Uh, so, subjects experiencing secure attachment imagery after seeing the threatening faces, they had reduced levels of fearful intrusion, even on a physiological level, over the next 2 days. So, the group that didn't get the imagery, were probably having headaches and difficulty sleeping and flashbacks to the fearful faces and the subjects experiencing the secure attachment imagery didn't have as much of that. So that's pretty phenomenal. Um, so let's go through the stages of treatment that you would go through with a preoccupied person. So the initial focus, as always, is establishing that collaborative treatment frame. Um, in a way to both temper the hyperactivation of the attachment system and reactivate the exploratory system. Because patients with this pattern are usually quite compliant, it's important that the therapist minimally use phrases like "I'd like you to," "I want you to." This is David Elliott. He's more beneficial phrasings are "the invitation is to," or "what if you were to imagine," or "when you're ready, you can say what your experience is." So he really focuses on having the clinician try to stay out of it as much as possible. So most of the early work entails the systematic use of IPF imagery and consistently enhancing metacognitive awareness of nonverbal and verbal misattunements as they occur, both in the imagery and in real life throughout the week. Since parental over-involvement contributes to the development of anxious preoccupation, the early IPF imagery emphasizes non-involving parent figures who redirect the patient's outside-in orientation to inside-out orientation by focusing on careful, consistent attunement to the patient as child experiences. So every time we start, especially in the beginning, we're having them imagine that they are children, um, after settling them in for a bit. So, since caregivers were pervasively misattuned, the IPFs are consistently accurately attuned to a wide range of the patient's states of mind. So, um, and again, the high levels of anxious arousal in preoccupied parents. Um, the imagery emphasizes parents who soothe, comfort, and reassure, which serves both to lower the overall level of anxious arousal and to temper the arousal of hyperactivated attachment behavior that occurs when abandonment fear is present. So, So the to summarize, the early stages of treatment are really building the ideal parent figures and establishing them using the five qualities that we know develop secure attachment, as well as any like positive opposites that we find. If your mother was rejecting, your ideal mom is going to be completely accepting, obviously. Um, and developing that relationship and you getting to a point where you can use the parents as a tool, when you need safety, when you need soothing, that you can imagine them and you can see them doing those things. Um, as the early, stages of treatment, that's what we're trying to do and correcting for that outside in orientation. So in the middle stages, more careful focus is brought to episodes of activation of attachment behavior that occur in or outside the context of the therapeutic relationship. Um, Ruptures in the therapy relationship occur typically in response to empathic failures, heightened abandonment fear when the therapist will be or is absent, and at such times the patient may become excessively demanding of proximity and contact seeking, or attempts to control the therapist's responsiveness. These are just hyperactivating strategies and exaggeration of normal attachment behaviors during times of threat. So the ruptures and fears are not easy to resolve within the context of the attachment behavioral system, meaning in the imagery. So if there's ruptures in the therapeutic relationship, that is, you want to leave the IPF and go right to the first pillar, collaboration, and see what that rupture was about and try to repair it. And a consistent focus in the middle late stages is enhancing the self-development, self-esteem in general, particularly the emergence of the patient's strongest, best, and most unique sense of self, in addition to modulating the attachment system. A main objective of treatment of the anxious patient is activation of a healthy exploratory system that serves as a basis for mature self-development. The emergence will be apparent during the imagery in the form of the patient having discoveries and new experiences and feeling good and enriched by them. It will be apparent outside of therapy by the patient's reports of greater autonomy and of actions motivated by self-interests. Clear signs of treatment progress include, and well, this is with preoccupied people, but also insecure, dismissing, reduction in the frequency and degree of hyperactivation, diminished preoccupation with past hurt, maintaining a here and now state of mind, sustaining an inside out orientation or having a balanced focus on the state of mind of the other and self, and reactivation of the exploratory system. And the strongest indicator of progress is the capacity to sustain self-exploration in a wide range of areas within and outside treatment without activation of attachment behavior. So that's what we're hoping for. And then at the later stages of treatment, intermediate and advanced metacognitive skills are cultivated and developed. Also, at later stages, the focus can shift to a positive internal working model for secure intimacy, being asked to imagine a hypothetical romantic partner in the context of secure intimacy. So, ideal intimate partners, switching from ideal parents, includes the quality of early IPF imagery and also emphasize qualities that are especially important for anxious patients, particularly non-involving, showing consistent and accurate attunement, providing a secure base for exploration, and encouraging self-development within the context of intimacy. Sounds just great, doesn't it? So I have seen some amazing things happen in the treatment with this modality, and I've seen this happen. I've seen preoccupied people transform, dismissing people transform. Maybe the next webinar will be a little more on that. Um, but but we'll see. Ways to reach us. So uh join our newsletter so you know when the next webinar is, when the courses are. We haven't adult attachment interview workshop coming up next week. And these are self-paced courses that you can do on your own. There's level 1 and level 2. And that's if you like to learn on your own at your own pace. Feel free to email me any questions at all. And then this is integrativeattachmenttherapy.com is the new website. So yeah, I'm gonna reach out to everyone and see if people would like to do a Q&A session. I'd be happy to do that. Also happy to take suggestions for next or for further webinars, podcasts, whatever this is going to be. And I hope that something I shared was new and helpful. And I wish you all a wonderful Sunday and rest of your month.